take a moment right now and gently step away from the noise filling your mind. Allow yourself to quietly tune in to what your intuition has been attempting to communicate to you for quite some time. Over the past few days, or perhaps even within the last few hours, there is a real possibility that you have observed a strange sense of unease stirring within you. Maybe it appeared as a quiet pressure in your chest, or as a thought that suddenly emerged without warning, pulling you toward a specific person without any clear explanation. You may have sensed that, despite the physical separation or the stillness that appears obvious on the surface, something deeper still seems to be unfolding between you. It can feel almost as though an unseen dialogue is happening beneath everything, beyond any spoken word, beyond any message left unread. That feeling is not simply your imagination working against you. That unease you have been carrying is not merely anxiety, nor is it a desperate attempt to hold on to something from the past. It may be a signal that energy is beginning to stir and move in your direction. It is quite possibly not a coincidence that you are encountering this right now. In the realm of energy and vibration, very little occurs without purpose, and no genuine connection is truly hollow or empty. If you have found yourself here in this particular moment, it may be because something within you has been quietly searching for a form of confirmation, a sign that what you have been sensing carries some kind of truth. Your logical mind may have worked hard to dismiss it, perhaps out of a fear of being let down again, or of hoping for something that never arrives. But your deeper self appears to recognize something that cannot be explained quite so simply. The soul tends to be sensitive to subtle waves of information, signals that may travel faster than any message or call ever could. And those signals appear to be pointing towards something shifting, something that may not be as finished or as settled as it once seemed. Welcome to Carl Jung Psychology. If you have been sensing that a particular connection in your life is not as over as the silence suggests, you are in exactly the right place. What you are about to explore goes far beyond surface-level relationship advice. We are going to look at this through the lens of energy, psychological depth, and the kind of inner transformation that tends to unfold in the spaces between people when no one is watching. Stay with this. It may shift something inside you that has been waiting a long time to move. If you are still watching this, you are already part of the rare few who are willing to face what most people spend their entire lives running from. 97% of people scroll past content like this, not because it does not reach them, but because it reaches them too deeply. If this is already moving something inside you, subscribe to Carl Jung Psychology right now and turn on notifications. What you are about to hear does not just explain why this person has not truly let go. It will permanently change how you see yourself and this connection. The path that has brought you here has not been a simple or painless one. You have moved through long stretches filled with uncertainty. You have questioned yourself repeatedly, wondering whether it was time to finally release your hold on this, whether your patience was carrying any real meaning, or whether the connection you felt so clearly was only something you had constructed within the architecture of your own mind. That kind of emotional weight has a way of becoming deeply exhausting, particularly when what you observe in the visible world appears to be nothing but absence. But nothing you have experienced along this journey has been without meaning or value. that quiet persistence alive in your heart, that gentle, steady refusal to completely close the door, may not be stubbornness or an inability to move on. It may actually be your inner guidance system reminding you that something here remains unresolved, that the deeper purpose of this particular connection has not yet reached its natural conclusion. What you are beginning to sense now could represent an early stage of something that is starting to take shape in the outer world. Often, just before something truly meaningful begins to shift in a visible way, there tends to be a period of emotional tension, a kind of inner unease that is difficult to name. It feels somewhat like the building pressure before a powerful wave forms out in the open ocean. That stillness before everything changes, that may be precisely where you are standing right now. Something appears to have shifted. Where there was once only silence, there now seem to be small openings, subtle cracks allowing a kind of truth to filter through. Your presence in this person's life has not faded, even across distance and time. It has likely reached a point where it may no longer be so easily dismissed or set aside. It is worth understanding something clearly. You have not been holding space for someone who has simply walked away without a second thought or forgotten you entirely. The reality tends to be far more layered and complex than that. While you have been navigating your own doubt and emotional uncertainty, something deeper has quite possibly been unfolding on the other side of this connection. There may have been a quiet transformation taking place, one that no outside observer could detect. It has been occurring in the less visible regions of the mind, in the spaces where real internal change tends to begin. This person may now be experiencing something they can no longer push aside quite as easily as before. The intensity you have been picking up on recently is possibly not random or meaningless. It may be connected to the idea that the resistance which once stood firm within them is beginning to weaken. The barriers they constructed, whether from fear, pride, or a kind of inner confusion about what they were feeling, may be starting to loosen under the pressure of something they can no longer entirely deny. This shift does not appear to be driven by anything external. It seems to be happening because truth has a way of gradually rising toward the surface, regardless of how deeply it has been pressed down. The connection between you is not something that can be fully accounted for through logic alone. It tends to run deeper than that, rooted in something that time and distance may not have the power to entirely erase. To truly understand why this shift may be happening now, and why what is beginning to emerge might feel different from anything that has come before, it becomes important to consider what may have been unfolding within this person during the long period of silence. There is someone who has been moving with a great deal of caution, someone who has maintained their distance while quietly observing from the periphery of your shared history. They have been caught between their own internal fears and a pull toward you that they have worked very hard to ignore or suppress. During the time apart, they may have been living in a way that has quietly drained them, day after day, in ways that are not visible from the outside. On the surface, they may have appeared composed, even fully in control. They may have worked to present a version of their life that seemed entirely unaffected, as though everything was simply continuing along its normal course. They constructed a kind of image, almost a mask, not only for others but for themselves as well. It functioned as a way of convincing themselves that stepping back had been the right, the rational, the healthy choice. But over time, that mask may have grown too heavy to keep holding up. Beneath it, there has possibly been an ongoing internal conflict that no one else has had any access to. Night after night, something within them may have been quietly at war. They attempted to push back against what they felt. They worked to justify the distance through logic, searching for reasons that would make the separation feel sensible and sound. They told themselves it was the wiser path, the safer ground. Some of that likely came from pride, some from fear, and some from a deep discomfort with emotions they did not quite know how to navigate or contain. This is something worth sitting with for a moment. Sometimes people create distance not because they feel nothing, but because what they feel is too overwhelming to hold. Being genuinely seen by another person can be deeply unsettling. For some individuals, it can stir a fear of losing a sense of control or of causing harm either to themselves or to someone they care about. But when two paths appear to be meant to cross in a significant way, it tends to be very difficult for mental reasoning alone to permanently obstruct that connection. Eventually, the effort of resistance seems to outweigh what the resistance was protecting. Slowly, the defenses they constructed have quite possibly begun to loosen at their edges. They may have started to notice that life without your presence feels somewhat hollow, lacking the depth and texture it once seemed to hold naturally. There may be a growing awareness within them that they have not been living entirely honestly with themselves, almost as though they have been performing a role that no longer fits who they are in the process of becoming. Every time they attempted to move forward and build more distance between you, something may have quietly redirected them back. Not something visible or nameable, but something apparently strong enough to pull their thoughts toward you again and again, without their permission. This is not simply about missing someone. It appears to be something more foundational, something that calls into question their very sense of self at a deeper level. It may have become a kind of turning point within them, something close to the beginning of a quiet and necessary awakening. There may have been restless nights when your name surfaced in their thoughts without any invitation. Moments when they attempted to focus on ordinary responsibilities only to find themselves interrupted by vivid memories of you. These memories may not have softened with time. If anything, they may have grown clearer, more persistent, more difficult to simply set aside and ignore. It is almost as though something continues to draw them back toward fully recognizing what this connection actually represents. Consider for a moment the exhaustion of continuously resisting something that feels genuinely significant. That may be what this person has been experiencing. They have been pressing against something that simply refuses to dissolve. And over time, they may have started to realize that the sense of control they believed they possessed was not quite as solid as it appeared from the outside. Distancing themselves from you did not deliver the peace they had been anticipating. Instead, it may have produced a quiet but persistent longing, one they could not seem to outrun no matter how much noise they surrounded themselves with. What they once chose to push aside may have now become something they can no longer overlook. What they worked so carefully to avoid has perhaps become something they are now beginning to face directly. If what you are hearing right now is resonating with something you have been carrying, this is exactly the kind of content Carl Jung psychology explores consistently. The deeper psychological and energetic dimensions of human connection. If this channel has been finding you at the right moments, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. You may discover that the content continues to arrive precisely when something within you needs to hear it most. There were periods when they attempted to quiet these feelings by surrounding themselves with distraction. Other people, noise, activity, anything that might fill the particular shape of space that had been left behind. But even then, certain comparisons may have surfaced. Thoughts they may never openly admit, but ones that quietly continued to pull them back in your direction. They may have found themselves measuring the depth they once encountered in your presence against the more surface-level quality of what they found elsewhere. They may have noticed the difference between the steadiness they experienced beside you and the restlessness that seemed to follow them nearly everywhere else. With every such comparison, something important may have grown more difficult to ignore. They may have begun to recognize that your place in their life carries a particular kind of significance, one that cannot simply be handed to someone new. These moments of contrast did not push you further apart. Instead, they may have functioned like a mirror, reflecting back a truth that was becoming increasingly difficult to turn away from. They appeared to reveal that what you offered at a deeper level was not something easily replicated elsewhere. They may have searched for distraction and found something closer to an absence they could not name. And gradually, something may have shifted in their understanding. A quiet, reluctant recognition that what is shaped by genuine connection cannot be replaced by temporary noise. This difficulty in fully releasing the thought of you is not a flaw in their character. It may actually be one of the clearest indications that you hold a place in their life that was shaped for you alone. The emptiness they encountered in their attempts to move on may have become one of their most important internal lessons, showing them slowly and undeniably that certain connections are not interchangeable with others. Now, the structure that was built out of ego and self-protection may be beginning to give way. What once appeared to be a solid wall of pride could be slowly shifting into something more like a bridge, built from a growing sense of humility and honest self-reflection. This person may have begun revisiting their past choices with a different kind of clarity, not to punish themselves, but to understand. They may be recalling conversations you shared, the moments when you reached out and they chose not to respond. And now, with a clarity that can be uncomfortable yet necessary, they may be starting to see the genuine weight of what you represented in their life. This dissolution of ego, viewed through a Jungian lens, tends to be an essential element of authentic inner transformation. Carl Jung suggested that the persona, the mask we construct to meet the world, must eventually be seen for what it is before any real growth can occur. Without that recognition, any movement toward reconnection would likely remain shallow and short-lived. But what appears to be happening here carries considerably more depth. It may represent a transformation at the root level, a fundamental shift in how this person understands themselves in relation to you and to what you shared. They may have come to sense, in a way, they can no longer reason themselves out of. That, releasing you entirely, would represent a kind of loss they are not prepared to accept. The confusion that once clouded their thinking may be gradually giving way to a quieter form of clarity. There is a principle that tends to operate quietly in the background during periods of separation, one that is easy to overlook when you are in the middle of it. It might be described as the principle of contrast. Sometimes, distance does not exist to make someone lose you. It may be there to help them recognize your genuine value through exposure to everything else. That may be precisely the experience this person has been moving through. When they stepped outside the energy of your shared connection, there may have been an expectation of finding something simpler, something that required less emotional investment or depth. Instead, they may have encountered a contrast so stark that it quietly dismantled assumptions they had been carrying for a long time. During this period apart, they may have sought connection with others, not always in a romantic sense, but simply to find companionship or to fill the silence that had settled in. Yet through those experiences, the distinct quality of your presence may have become even more apparent by comparison. Conversations may have felt somewhat flat, lacking the emotional and intellectual richness that seemed to arise naturally between you. With you, even the absence of words may have carried a certain weight and meaning. With others, that same silence may have felt uncomfortable, carrying the unspoken pressure to explain, to perform, to maintain an appearance. This contrast may have been frustrating at first, but it may also have been quietly and unavoidably revealing. They may have come to understand that your presence was not simply a comfort. It may have felt like a space where their actual self did not need to be concealed or managed. Almost without noticing it, they may have begun measuring the ease they once felt beside you against the subtle tension they experienced nearly everywhere else. They may have recalled how you listened, the quality of your full attention, your patience, and that particular quality within you that allowed you to recognize something worth seeing in them, even at moments when they struggled to see it in themselves. In comparison to the emotional distance they encountered elsewhere, the memory of you may have gradually become something warm and grounding, a place that something within them continued to reach toward, even when the mind tried to redirect it. What they are experiencing now may not be a simple emotional void that anyone could step in to fill. It may feel more like an absence with a very specific shape, and that shape may correspond only to you. They may have begun to understand that temporary experiences can occupy time, but they do not nourish something at the deeper level. They may feel somewhat out of alignment within their own life, as though they are working to fit themselves into situations and spaces that no longer correspond to who they are in the process of becoming. It is something like trying to use an old key on a completely new lock. It does not turn, it opens nothing, and no amount of force changes that. This inner dissonance may have brought forward a truth they had been avoiding for a long time. You were quite possibly never simply an option in their life. You may have been something closer to an essential part of their inner equilibrium, a missing element in a structure that does not function correctly without it. Something deeper appears to have been reawakened within them, a memory of what it can feel like to genuinely belong. When two people connect at the depth you appear to have shared, something like an energetic home tends to form, an invisible space where both can exist without the constant weight of pretense. This person may have come to recognize that outside of that shared space, something within them feels quietly but persistently drained. The process of comparison may have challenged the part of them that needed to believe they could move forward entirely on their own terms. But at a deeper level, it may have been working quietly in the direction of healing, helping them distinguish between something that catches light briefly and something that holds lasting warmth. They may now understand that what they once shared with you is not easily encountered, that attraction can exist in many directions, but genuine transformation, the kind that actually changes a person from the inside, may have been something they only truly experienced in the space you created together. This realization may have gradually shifted something within them. The urge to pull away may have begun softening into a quiet, growing pull toward the possibility of returning, not out of dependence or nostalgia alone, but from a place of recognition and a more honest understanding of what your presence has genuinely meant. Here is something that may be worth holding on to. In the realm of energy, physical distance tends to function as something of an illusion. There appears to be an invisible thread, something like a red string of energy in certain long-held traditions that keeps two deeply connected people linked, regardless of how much space or silence exists between them. This thread may stretch, it may twist and become tangled, but it does not appear to simply break. It operates somewhat like elastic tension. The more one person works to pull away, the more the pull between both ends appears to build. Eventually, that tension may reach a point where something deeper takes over and begins drawing the person back. There is also a role you may have played recently, one you might not fully recognize yet. It is quite possible that somewhere along the way, you reached a moment where you chose to release the need to control the outcome. You stopped reaching outward and instead turned your attention inward, toward your own development, your own sense of wholeness. By reclaiming your energy and redirecting it toward yourself, you may have shifted the entire dynamic between you. You stopped sending out energy shaped primarily by longing or urgency and began to carry something closer to a sense of inner completion. And in doing so, you may have activated something, a quiet principle that tends